Japanese automotive manufacturers really know how to make an inline-six engine, creating the legendary 2JZ and RB26 with many great engines in their shadows, but not all of them are created equal. Today, we're going to look at how the engines that powered Japan's most iconic sports cars stack up against each other, ranking them in a tier list format and analyzing their designs and impacts. Let's see which one comes out on top. As we start off with Toyota, it's worth mentioning that they like to offer many engine options within each vehicle, which is why you're going to be seeing a lot of the applications overlap. We're beginning with Toyota's first ever engine, known as the Type A inline-six. This engine is ultra simplistic and greatly influenced from the Chevy Stovebolt, which is best known for its variations that came after the Type A's production ended. The Type A uses full iron construction and a pushrod setup and puts out moderate power for its era. Considering it has no major defects but isn't wildly impressive, I think it should start the video out in C tier. The Type B followed the Type A's design rather closely, with the most notable difference being an additional crankshaft bearing. It was equally robust but used in a far wider variety of applications. It was designed only 2 years after the Type A and shared many of these same production years. With this being said and the Type B being undoubtedly the better engine, I think it earns the bump to B tier, certainly impressive for over 80 years ago. Following the end of the Second World War, Toyota developed the F inline-six engine line. Deciding to go for larger displacement, the F produced slightly better power figures. This series was still loosely based on the Stovebolt, an intriguing decision that suggested Toyota did not want to reinvent the wheel. The F was found primarily in larger trucks and buses and didn't seem to progress much from the previous engine despite starting production nearly 2 decades later. I think it's reasonable to be putting it into the D tier. The 2F is essentially an F engine but with a larger bore and thus a larger displacement. It also utilized a significantly higher compression ratio and revised the oiling system. There seems to be a bit more documentation on these engines, and they've gained a reputation for having quite poor performance, but they're pretty much as reliable as they come. For that, I think it earns the upper C tier. The 3F was revised a fair bit, with different heads, the introduction of fuel injection instead of carburetors, and a cast iron block. On top of this, it also added more crankshaft bearings, a technique seen in the previous engine line to increase reliability. Everything I can find regarding most owners' experiences with the 3F suggests unbelievable longevity was achieved with this design, with many reaching 500,000 kilometers. It's worthy of being our first entry to the A tier. The successor to the 3F engine, and technically the final engine of this series, the 1FZ was yet another indestructible workhorse, a common theme for the Toyota brand. Interestingly, the 1FZ has the second largest displacement of any engine on this list, and makes heaps of torque as a result. This engine also came in a dual overhead cam 24-valve format, largely resolving the poor fuel economy of its predecessors. The 1FZ comes in the Land Cruiser and is oddly enough used on many forklifts, making its torque and reliability a perfect match for its applications. The 1FZ belongs to the A tier. The other Toyota inline-six engine line that was introduced halfway through the F engine's production was the M inline-six. The M family was intended to be the smaller displacement straight 6 line and was slightly more advanced, utilizing a single overhead camshaft in the very first iteration. Along with this was the material choice of an aluminum head with a cast iron block, greatly reducing the weight of the engine. Like many of Toyota's straight 6 engines from here on out, the M had a turbocharged variation that seemed to cut above its naturally aspirated counterpart. Now, I've combined the original M with the 2M that's found in the ultra-rare 2000 GT, as the 2M was quite simply the M inline-six, but just with a longer stroke and a larger resulting displacement. I think these engines belong right around the B tier. Also found in the 2000 GT was the 3M, a major revision to the previous designs. The 3M adopted dual overhead cams and hemispherical heads that were made by Yamaha rather than Toyota. It still clung on to the usage of carburetors, but the technological improvements it received make it one of the most desirable of the M series to this very day. The 3M is a worthy engine of the A tier. I did not group the 4M engine with the 3M as it was quite different, unlike the succession from the first 2 iterations. The 4M engine actually stuck to the original single overhead cam design for the sake of simplicity, and most importantly converted to fuel injection. Oddly enough, despite a larger displacement than the 3M, the 4M produced significantly less power. Overall, I think the 4M is somewhat of a linear progression from the 2M and belongs in the B tier. Found in the second generation of the Celica Supra, the 5M and the larger displacement 6M followed in the footsteps of the 3M design. It retained dual cams, fuel injection, and introduced a more advanced computation unit. Widely known as one of Toyota's best, these engines are what began to strongly popularize the Toyota Supra. The 5M and the 6M are in the high A tier. Now this is the fifth one of these videos that I have done, and I've researched well over 100 engines at this point. Of all of them, I have yet to see an engine with as many mixed opinions as the 7M. Some of them claiming that the 7M is one of the greatest engines ever, with others saying they belong in junkyards. I'll give you the bad and then the good. The biggest problem reminds me of my Subaru ownership, with head gasket failures seen widely on the 7M. This was due to an assembly error from Toyota. I've also seen complaints of oil leaks and connecting rod issues. Now, from what I've deduced, it seems that most of those complaints come from people who are trying to boost these engines to the moon. The good is that when we look at the most sought after version, being the 7M GTE in the Mark III Supra, it made great power and was very reliable in its stock form, with thousands of them still running today. I'm going to give the 7M the benefit of the doubt here and drop a really hot take that it will be our first entry to the S tier. The 1G engine was the smaller alternative engine offered in the Mark III Supra and had a wide range of usages. It made far less power than its alternative 7M engine. It also had head gasket failures under boost. The 1G utilized multi-port fuel injection, and like many of Toyota's straight-six engines, is best found in the GTE format. Overall, the 1G is somewhat underpowered and goes largely unnoticed by those seeking an engine swap when the alternative of our next engine exists. The 1G should fall right around the upper B tier. The JZ series was the technical successor to the M family. Keeping the cast iron block and aluminum head material choices, these engines are as close to flawless as you can find. The later 1JZ engines introduced variable valve timing to an already ultra-efficient 24-valve dual overhead cam valve train. The early engines had some turbo hiccups in the turbocharged GTE format, but these were fixed in 1996. The real fun with the 1JZ started when the owners tore them apart to modify them, and word got out quickly that these engines could handle copious amounts of boost pressure. This exact thing is what makes them so popular for engine swaps, with the additional bonus of bulletproof reliability. The 1JZ is undoubtedly an S tier engine. Let's be honest, this is the reason you clicked on this video, and there's a decent chance you even skipped straight to this part, so if that's you, welcome aboard. The 2JZ GTE is possibly the most hyped engine in existence, and honestly, until it came time for me to research for this video, I wasn't fully convinced. But being from an engineering background, the more I learned about it, the more I can confidently say that the 2JZ is a glorious masterpiece. The reason for its creation came from the large success of the Nissan RB26, an engine that we'll be getting to shortly. It introduced a steel head gasket combined with a closed deck layout, an ultra-tight sealing formula that enables the biggest turbochargers that you can find to be fitted to this engine. The crankshaft, being the heart of any engine, is made of forged steel, creating extreme surface hardness with immense yield strength. For the 2JZ, how much power it makes isn't even relevant, but rather how much it can handle. The engine was over-designed in every way possible, a byproduct of what happens when pure performance is prioritized over cutting production costs. I could go on and on about the 2JZ's reliability and incredible sound as well. It's no argument, the 2JZ is firmly planted in the D tier. That's a joke. Please do not come and find out where I live and track me down, or even worse, not be subscribed to the channel. You know who you are. The 2JZ sits atop the S tier. Getting into Nissan, the P engine was technically the fourth inline six, coming after the NAK, NB, and NC, all of which are essentially variations on the same precursor to the P inline six, the first to see widespread and long-lasting usage. The basic structure was a large 4.0-liter displacement pushrod engine with carburetors. Interestingly, it was water-cooled as far back as 1959, and in terms of reliability, these things are a disaster. From what I can find, the later P40 models leak oil excessively and overheat regularly. Maybe Porsche had the right idea, pushing off the usage of water cooling. Overall, the underwhelming performance and poor reliability of the P inline-six engine will be landing it into the D tier. The TB engine was the direct follow-up to the P engine and gained some significant features such as fuel injection in the later variants. The TB and TB48 in particular is the largest inline six here at a staggering 4.8 liters. It also had Nissan's version of variable valve timing. These engines made tons of torque fitting to its larger vehicle applications, and it's also worth mentioning that in recent years some people have modified these things to reach four-figure horsepower numbers. The The TB was a quality follow-up to the P engines and gets the step up to the upper B tier. The G engine was a smaller 2.0 liter or 2.5 liter straight six depending on the variant used to lower road tax within Japan. It was composed of a single overhead cam design and 3 carburetors. For its simplicity and respectable power per liter figures at the time, the G engine found itself in racing applications like the Prince R380. This engine also is commonly referred to as the Prince G as it was made around the time of the Prince and Nissan 1966 merger. I'd say it's probably worthy of the B tier. Nissan's H-series engine came after the G engine, because alphabet. The H family is mainly inline-4 engines, but the H30 in particular is a 3.0-liter inline-6 that makes less power on average than its predecessor, despite having a larger displacement. It shared the same cast iron block and aluminum head format as the competing M engines that we discussed from Toyota. Like the 1FZ, the H engine is commonly found in forklifts. It also seems to experience spark plug issues and doesn't have the performance to make up for it. I'd say the H family is more successful in the 4-cylinder format, but the H30 in particular belongs in the C tier. The S20 is a unique and well-designed 2-liter inline-6. It achieved high-volume airflow with 24 valves and 2 cams. The crankshaft is robust, with 7 bearings used for extensive support. The S20 follows the same cast iron block and aluminum head formula that's proven so successful with the engines we've covered. This engine also came in the original Skyline GTR and would become a major reason why it remains a car that is still produced today, although with unfortunate discussions of discontinuation. The performance out of the S20 became cause for extensive motorsport usage as well, and overall it deserves a spot in the A tier. The L series saw many variants with many changes in design, with the cast iron block being one of the only constants. The first and smallest L20 was a single cam style with 12 valves. Some versions of the L engine used fuel injection and others, such as the L24, used carburetors. The best version in my opinion is the L28 ET turbocharged variant found in the 280ZX. I have come across complaints of carburetor issues, but the best versions like the L28 ET use multi-port fuel injection, suppressing this concern. For its well-known reliability and successful usage in many iconic sports cars, the L engines will be going to the upper A tier. Getting onto the engines that triggered the creation of the 2JZ, the Nissan RB engine is one for the ages. The RB series, like many of Nissan's engines, are tagged by their displacements, with the 2.6-liter RB26 being the most popular and rightfully so. In its twin-turbo format, this engine is a monster on the level of the 2JZ. With a 24-valve twin-cam setup and a specialized alloy head material, they also can be endlessly modified with next to zero issue. There were some oil pump issues in the earlier RB engines that are worth mentioning, but these were resolved in 1993. Many engineering features such as the cooling channels in the pistons or the innovative connecting rod design make these engines the stuff of legends. The RB engines belong right next to the JZ family in the S tier. Rounding out the video will be the 2 Mitsubishi gasoline inline-6 engines. Straying from the designs of Toyota and Nissan, the KE64 has an iron block with iron heads. With a small 2-liter displacement, a likely product of reducing road tax in Japan, the KE64 is somewhat underwhelming, being less powerful and heavier than other inline-6 engines of the era such as the Toyota M. There isn't a ton of documentation on these due to narrow application and low production numbers, but I think it's safe to say it belongs somewhere around the C tier. I left the same picture here because of these engines' shared application and virtually no images to be found of either of them. The 6G34 was the replacement to the KE64 with the same 2-liter displacement. There is a notable change, however, with the 6G34 embracing the more common format of a cast iron block with aluminum heads. With a rather high compression ratio of 9.5 to 1, the 6G34 makes marginally better power than its predecessor and is undisputedly the best inline-6 that Mitsubishi made. For whatever reason, Mitsubishi never really went any further with inline-6 engines and only made very few. I will give their best variant the benefit of the doubt here and place it in the B tier. Our final engine of the video is going to be a pretty fun one. Mazda, who has previously never really gotten into the inline-6 engine, has created one for the 2024 model year. Hopefully this is the first of many from a company who already builds the inline-4 so well. So the Mazda CX-90 is an SUV that will be receiving what seems to be a pretty serious engine. It has a 3.3-liter displacement and will come in a turbocharged format reported to make 340 horsepower. I'm really hoping someone wiggles one into a Miata, but that remains to be seen. Although reliability is unknown at this point in time, I'm really excited to see what this engine brings, and I'm going to be slinging it into the A tier. So there we have it, that's my full Japanese inline 6 tier list. I know it might look a little bit Toyota biased, especially in the S tier, but keep in mind that the RB engine is a full family rather than a single engine, and I do think that all of them are incredible. I hope you enjoyed this installment of the series, which will be continuing, so please be sure to hit that subscribe button on the screen now to stay tuned for the next one. Also be sure to let me know what you would change. I enjoy your perspectives and learning things about these engines that I didn't know. Thanks for watching and have a great day.